Hi, good morning. I was just chatting with a friend of mine about yoga as a lineage, and I realized that this is something that doesn't come through in the group classes and something that I think is really, really important. And so putting this out there, the things that come up for me are so mixed, so I'm just going to present them to you in the way that they come up for me, and hopefully you'll forgive a little disorganization at this point. Because some of it is a little emotional and some of it is cultural, and when those things come together, it can be very difficult for me to articulate. So, what we were talking about is my friend is in Italy, and I teach Rocket. I practice Ashtanga, and I have training in Iyengar yoga. I teach mostly private lessons, and I teach also at Equinox. So back when I used to teach at a studio and at Equinox, just in New York, before New York, it was different. Every place is just different. There used to be this like clash between people who loved the studio classes, and I would teach Ashtanga-based classes there. They're like, gym yoga, boo. And then at the gyms, they would be like, oh, yoga studio. Gyms are so much nicer. You can shower here. You have the whole gym here. It's so much better. There's this very like in-group, out-group that to me was really just silly because it's so similar what you see. From my perspective, it's so similar what you see at a studio versus at a gym. A lot of it is people who are very new to yoga, and the culture is so consumer-based and business-based that the model is you take a class, there's no commitment, you take a class here or there, there's no requirement to get in to a level 2, for example, or a mixed levels is open to everybody. And all ages, all capabilities, all backgrounds. And so people who choose to come into a yoga class, that's self-selecting enough, right? So when you get into a class, whether it's in a studio or in a gym, sometimes it's just not that different in terms of the people that a teacher comes across. But from the student perspective, the teacher can be very, very different, right? And the very, very different, some of it is education, right? Some of it is background, what we came from. Sometimes when you take a class with a teacher who used to be like a Broadway dancer, or a teacher who left finance or corporate America to follow a different dream, these people are going to obviously see and present things differently, right? And personality, male, female, age, non-binary, place that they grew up, national, international. Here it's a lot of American is what I've seen. But my friend is in Italy, and he's taking Rocket classes, which is what I teach. And when I got to New York, no one else was teaching Rocket. It's something that I discovered when I was an undergrad at Duke. And they didn't even call it Rocket, they just called it Hatha Yoga on the schedule. So when I took those Hatha Yoga classes, to me it felt like homecoming, because I've grown up doing these sorts of movements my whole life. So when I take a class that's not based on an Indian lineage, I feel this is weird, it's some kind of movement, okay, fine, but it doesn't really resonate to me personally as what I would call yoga. Anything can be called yoga, right? That's how it's really presented these days. If you go to a class where you're lifting weights, it can be called yoga. You go to a class where you just lay on your back with pillows, it can be called yoga. You go to a class with me and you do a lot of push-ups, it's called yoga. So my friend in Italy is having this experience where in Rocket they're telling him to keep his gaze in this way for this pose, or do this posture without a back bend. I teach that posture with a back bend, which is correct. And to me, and I used to get so hung up, and this is correct, this is not correct, right? If you grow up in like really traditional lineages, as I did, classically trained, there is the right way, which is like this much, and then there's the wrong way, right, which is everything else. I've really come away from some of that, which is not to say it's right or wrong to believe in a narrow or a broad, right? It's hard to escape these distinctions, but within the lineage of Rocket, I was telling my friend that the family tree is very spread out, right? So I studied with my teacher, David, and depending on when you meet a teacher in their teaching career, you're going to get a different learning, right? And also I have my own background and my own learnings, the way that I teach. So I learned with David, who learned directly from Larry, who created Rocket, from his teachings with Pattabhi Jois of Ashtanga proper, which came from Krishnamacharya. And that's really where the lineage mostly begins for all of these things. For my Ashtanga proper, like, oh gosh, the Rocket people will hate that. For my traditional Ashtanga teachings, so, you know, Rocket is and isn't Ashtanga, right? It is and it's not. For Ashtanga that comes from Mysore, India, I studied with Faith in DC, and she studied directly with Pattabhi Jois, and we're back in the same lineage. It goes back to Krishnamacharya. I also did some really nice Iyengar teaching, and it's training, and it's really controversial. Usually Ashtanga and Iyengar people don't flow. But I do, I think there's so much to learn. I love the precision from Iyengar. So I learned from Terence, and I learned directly from John Schumacher, and John learned directly from Iyengar himself, which is, you know, such a blessing. So all of my lineages are just within a couple generations, right back to India. My parents, my family, everybody else, you know, directly in India. I also found I have good lineage for Bar, which is not so old, right? So it was created by Lottie Burke, and then she trained a group of people here in New York, and I learned from that second generation, from Amy, who learned from the people who started, I think, like Pure Bar, and then they had learned directly from Lottie Burke. I really love the old school bar stuff. I think, you know, the longer we get into fitness these days, the more watered down it gets, the more accessible it gets, which is really good, that you can find more of it everywhere. When I did my bar training, there was only one bar studio in Washington, D.C. Can you imagine? It was right after Black Swan came out, and suddenly, after that, everything really exploded in popularity. And now there's bar studios dime a dozen, yoga studios dime a dozen. What I find these days is most yoga teachers just sign up for a training from anyone, anything, which is not to say that it's bad. My first training I did with Mimi in DC, and very small likelihood she's ever going to see this, but I truly adored Mimi, and I learned so much from her, and I felt connected with her. My grandmother wanted to name me Mimi, so that and like her strength, I learned a lot from her. I learned a lot from Mari Bell as well when I was in DC, and they can both say that they were also trained with David, who trained with Larry, who trained with Pattabhi Jois, who trained with Krishnamacharya. So we're all kind of like family in that way, whether or not they would claim me as family or as student. You know, to me it's, I don't know. But at various times I was very, very, very close with these people, and they touched my life in a way that it's difficult to articulate. So what I would say, if you are just, you know, looking for a yoga class and you don't feel connected with that teacher, it may be personal, right? Maybe we don't always connect with everybody that we come across, and, you know, it's okay that sort of thing kind of happens. But it's also possible that your teacher doesn't feel directly connected with practice with lineage, with something that's really truly old and true and deep. This is true everywhere, right? You can take a class at a university. I mentioned I went to Duke. I have just a couple of teachers that I would say are just like, some of my favorite people on the planet. And they love what they teach. They love what they do. They love the material. They have connection, and I guarantee they're really connected with their lineage, right? The PhD lineage is very strong. As a dancer, lineage, very strong. I was my guru's first Aryan Gethram, right? So first sort of graduate for my teacher. She's very young. It's very special, that connection, and to be given to be connected with a teacher who's young and has so much passion for the life of living the art. It's different from a teacher who's just like doing it part-time, maybe kind of jaded, has seen it all. It's like dating, if you've been divorced a few times, you don't date the same way as when you're 16 and everything is brand new and every person is full of infinite possibilities, The state of being in love with the material, that's really what comes with strong lineage, right? So this is very common these days. I wish there was some sort of proper standardization that had nothing to do with money for education in yoga. For example, when I applied to colleges, when all of us apply to colleges, there's just a list of good rankings. Harvard's going to be at the top. When I went to Duke, it was ranked 5. It was pretty damn good. It was ranked higher than Columbia, which is Ivy. There's a system, and it's a very old system. The ranking is old, the money is old, the culture is old, It's good and it's bad, but it's known, right? Yoga has the potential to be like that, and, inshallah, it's going to grow up and be like that in the future. But these days, typically, you just put down $2,000 for a training. No one really cares if you practice every day or if you've just taken a couple of classes here or there, and you just attend the classes and do the homework. And I know people who don't even do all that and they still get the certificate, and as long as you have the certificate, you get hired, especially if you're charismatic and people like you. It's not like a medical school, right? Medical school is really hard, it's very grueling, not everybody gets through it. And yet, people are very picky when they pick their doctors, and they don't always take the advice, and they don't always, stay with that one opinion. They'll get a second opinion before they make any big changes. But I'll tell you, if you walk into a yoga classroom, whether or not you care about that teacher's education, you are going to do everything that teacher tells you to do, more or less, for 60 minutes. To me, that's a lot of trust. Your body. Right? Your movements, your time, your life. And it's more than just liking the teacher or liking their Instagram, Right now I have thousands of followers, and I don't know how much that means in context of the fact that I practice many hours a day, and I've been doing that for many years. And I do it because I love it, right? The practice, I don't get paid to practice. I love to practice, right? I love to teach. Thank God I get paid to teach. What a blessing. So I would say if you're just going into yoga and you don't quite like the class, or you don't quite like the teacher, there is just so much more to explore. Go to different teachers, ask them lots of questions. What's your background? Who have you trained with? What is the actual system of knowledge? Is it connected to something old? Did it just get franchised in the last 5 years? In which case, I would just leave personally. That's not what I want to invest in, but maybe that's what you connect with. Perhaps you don't want something that's really old and rooted. For me, the oldness of yoga is the most magical thing. The human bodies, anatomically speaking, and I've studied evolution for this reason, I think it's magical. that human bodies just haven't changed that much in thousands of years. The kind of fitness that we need, mind, body, holistically, probably hasn't changed in thousands of years, you know? Yoga is not a trend. Yoga is old. If you want to really feel good in your body and connect to who you are as a human being, choose something old. And don't tell me that you've been doing yoga for, 15 years if you've taken a class a month for 15 years. No, just do it. Just do it all the way. Do it every single day. It's not hard. I guarantee if you just make the choice to do it every day, to learn it, it will just happen for you, you know? It's like any addiction. It's not an addiction, but if you're addicted to something like scrolling social media, it doesn't matter if someone tells you you're busy, right? Like, you just make time to do it. I make time to do it. Yoga's like that. It feels good. You just have to find the correct fit, find the knowledge, find the right teacher, and I guarantee it will just change your life for the better. And I don't want to do this from a preachy, evangelical, up on my soapbox type of thing. It's just natural. You're a human being. Human beings love movement, love feeling good. Yoga is just a really old system of movements, and if you're tapped into a lineage, then you're probably tapped into something really old, and it's not going to be driven by the mood of the teacher that day, it's going to be more real, and it's going to hit in the right way, and you're going to love it. That's what I have to say. Subscribe, I'll have more to say soon. I hope it's helpful.